Is your name Google because you have everything I've been searching for?
That's smooth.
Are you a magician?
That's Sunadlukfe?
Because of his size down there, Mafia boss was rejected by every lady until he met a black stripper. Victor Moretti could make grown men weep with a glance, topple empires with a phone call, and had more blood on his hands than a surgeon during a 12-hour shift. But the one thing the city's most feared Mafia boss couldn't do? Keep a woman in his bed past sunrise. His empire was built on fear and bullets, but his love life? That crumbled on whispers, cruel laughter, and the kind of rejection that turns a man's spine to glass. Before we dive into this shocking story of power, rejection, and unexpected love, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss stories that challenge assumptions, spark emotions, and reveal how love can appear in the most unexpected places. The penthouse smelled like expensive mistakes and cheaper regrets. Victor stood at the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city, watching tiny cars navigate streets he practically owned. Behind him, silk sheets lay tangled and abandoned, still warm from Gabriella's hasty departure 20 minutes ago. She'd left her earring on the nightstand, a diamond teardrop that probably cost more than most people's mortgages, but she'd taken her dignity and his last shred of hope with her. "Mr. Moretti?" His driver's voice crackled through the intercom. "Miss Gabriella requested I inform you she's caught a sudden flight to Milan. Family emergency." Victor's jaw tightened. Of course she did. Family emergency. The same excuse Bianca had used. And Valentina before her. At least Sofia had been honest enough to laugh in his face before disappearing into the night like a particularly cruel ghost. He poured himself 3 fingers of scotch that cost more than the average person made in a month and drank it like water. The liquor burned, but not nearly as much as the memory of Gabriella's eyes. Those pitying, horrified eyes, when she'd seen him. Really seen him. Expectations versus reality, Sofia had said, barely containing her amusement. Victor had built an empire on being underestimated, but this was a different kind of small. This was the kind that made women flee to other continents, the kind that turned him into a punchline whispered in powder rooms and penthouse parties. Morty's packing a pocket pistol, someone had joked at a charity gala 6 months ago. The laughter had rippled through the crowd like wildfire, and Victor had smiled through it, plotting 3 different ways to ruin the comedian's life. He'd settled on bankrupting the man's import business and sleeping with his wife. Neither had made him feel better. His phone buzzed. A text from his oldest lieutenant, Carlo. "Boss, we need to talk about the dock situation. Numbers aren't adding up." Victor stared at the message, his gut twisting with something that felt suspiciously like dread. Carlo had been with him since they were teenagers, back when Victor was still Vinny from the Bronx and their biggest score was stealing car parts from a chop shop. Carlo knew where all the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. He typed back, "Tomorrow. Warehouse on 5th. The city glittered below him like a jewelry box full of broken promises. Victor owned half of it, controlled the other half, and yet he couldn't control the one thing that mattered. The narrative. Somewhere out there, in wine bars and country clubs, his name was followed by snickers and sympathetic head tilts. The man who had everything except the one thing that apparently mattered.
His phone rang.
Unknown number. "Moretti," he answered, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd ordered hits before breakfast. "Mr. Moretti, this is Detective Harris. We found your lieutenant, Carlo Russo, in his apartment an hour ago. I'm afraid it's not good news." Victor's hand tightened around the glass. "What happened?" "Apparent suicide. Single gunshot. But there's something you should know. We found documents. Financial records. It appears Mr. Russo was, well, we'll need you to come down to the station." The line went dead. Victor stood perfectly still, his reflection ghostly in the window.
Carlo. Dead.
And not just dead, talking. Even in death, Carlo was talking. He smashed the scotch glass against the wall, watching crystal explode into 1,000 expensive pieces. The crash felt good, felt real, in a way nothing had felt in months. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Carlo's number, timestamp from 3 hours ago. "Boss, if you're reading this, I'm already gone."
"I'm sorry."
For everything. Check your accounts. Check your properties. I wasn't the only one. Victor's blood ran cold. Not just skimming. Systematic theft. Betrayal that ran deeper than money. And worse, the words that followed. They all know, Vic. About you. About everything. I told them.
I'm sorry.
I needed the money, and they paid well for stories. I made you a joke. I made us both jokes. Victor's hand trembled as he deleted the message. Carlo hadn't killed himself. Carlo had been killed, and he'd left Victor a confession as a final act of either redemption or cruelty. Victor couldn't tell which. The penthouse suddenly felt like a cage. A beautiful, expensive cage where he'd been hiding from the world, from himself, from the truth that no amount of power could compensate for the thing he couldn't change. His driver's voice crackled again. Sir? Detective Harris is here. He's asking to come up. Tell him I'll meet him at the station tomorrow. Victor's voice was steady, decades of practice keeping emotion locked behind bulletproof glass. Tell him I'm grieving. He wasn't grieving Carlo. He was grieving the man he'd thought Carlo was, the friendship he'd thought they had, the empire that was apparently built on foundations made of lies and leaked secrets. Victor grabbed his jacket, black cashmere, custom-tailored, expensive enough to feed a family for a year, and walked out of his penthouse. His driver, Tommy, looked up with concern. Where to, boss? Drive, Victor said, sliding into the back of the town car. Anywhere. Everywhere. I don't care. Tommy knew better than to argue with that tone. He pulled into traffic, navigating the city's arteries while Victor stared out the tinted windows at a world that suddenly felt foreign. They drove for an hour, maybe two. Victor lost track. He watched neighborhoods blur past, from pristine downtown high-rises to gradually grittier streets where neon signs advertised promises in colors that hurt to look at. This was the part of the city Victor owned but never visited, the part where his money went to work while he stayed safely insulated in marble and Italian leather. Boss, Tommy said carefully, we're near the industrial district. You want me to turn back? Victor looked out at a street that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Strip clubs, dive bars, late-night bodegas with bulletproof glass and tired dreams. A place where nobody cared about your last name or your bank account. Stop here. Here? Boss, this isn't. I said stop. Tommy pulled over in front of a building with no name, just a red light above a steel door and bass, so heavy Victor could feel it through the car's soundproofing. He stepped out into air that smelled like rain and regret. A bouncer the size of a refrigerator sized him up, noted the expensive suit, and stepped aside without a word. Money talked in every language, even here. Inside, the club was darkness punctuated by spotlights and sin. The music wrapped around Victor like a physical thing, drowning out the noise in his head. He found a corner table, ordered whiskey that actually tasted like whiskey instead of prestige, and finally, for the first time in hours, he breathed. And that's when he saw her. She moved across the stage like she was teaching gravity a lesson, every motion deliberate and unapologetic. The spotlight loved her, but she didn't need it. She commanded attention the way Victor commanded respect, not by asking but by simply existing. Her eyes swept the crowd with an authority that made Victor straighten in his seat. When those eyes landed on him, they didn't flinch, didn't calculate his net worth, didn't undress him with assumptions. They just saw him. The song ended. She descended from the stage with the casual confidence of someone who knew her worth down to the cent and wouldn't negotiate. And then, impossibly, inexplicably, she walked straight toward his table. You look like you killed someone today, she said, sliding into the seat across from him like she'd been invited. Victor blinked, caught completely off guard. Excuse me? That face. That energy. She tilted her head, studying him with unsettling accuracy. You're either mourning or guilty. My money's on guilty. For the first time in 20 years, Victor Moretti didn't know what to say. The woman sitting across from Victor radiated the kind of confidence that couldn't be bought, inherited, or stolen. It simply was, like oxygen or gravity, and Victor found himself leaning forward despite every instinct telling him to maintain distance. I'm Victor, he started, reaching for the power move of a formal introduction. I know who you are, she interrupted, waving away his words like cigarette smoke. Your reputation walked in 5 minutes before you did. Also, your cologne is announcing itself from across the room.
Subtle.
Victor should have been offended. Men had lost teeth for less disrespect. Instead, he felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward in something dangerously close to a smile. And you are? Tired of men who think money makes them interesting. She flagged down a server with 2 fingers, the gesture economical and commanding. But since you're taking up my decompression space after a 3-hour shift, I'm Nyla. And you're buying my drink. The server appeared instantly, and Nyla ordered something complicated involving tequila and lime. Victor ordered another whiskey, mostly because his brain was still catching up to the conversation. Decompression space? He asked. This booth. I sit here every night after work, drink exactly 1.5 drinks, and remind myself why I do this job. Nyla stretched, her shoulders rolling back with the satisfaction of someone who'd earned her exhaustion. Usually, men smart enough to leave me alone during this ritual are smart enough to not need lessons in reading social cues. I wasn't aware there were assigned seats. Now you are. Their drinks arrived. Nyla took a sip of hers and made a face that suggested the bartender had gotten creative with the ratios. Victor found himself watching her with the kind of attention he usually reserved for business negotiations and people he planned to destroy. So, Nyla said, setting down her glass, what brings a man who probably owns 3 cars worth more than this building to a place where the bathroom requires a tetanus shot? Escaping. From everything. Nyla laughed, the sound cutting through the club's bass like a knife through butter. Oh, you're one of those. The tortured rich guy having an existential crisis. Let me guess, your assistant bought you the wrong yacht color? My oldest friend betrayed me, stole from me, and then killed himself, Victor said flatly. Or was killed. I'm not sure which is worse. The laughter died in Nyla's throat. She studied him with new intensity, her eyes narrowing as if trying to determine whether he was lying or simply unhinged. That's either the truth or you're the world's most committed sad boy. It's the truth. Well, damn. Nyla took another sip of her drink. That's significantly less funny than yacht colors. My condolences. They sat in silence for a moment, the club's chaos swirling around them like they were in the eye of a particularly loud storm. Victor couldn't remember the last time someone had responded to his problems with anything other than fear or calculation. Nyla's bluntness felt like cold water on a burn, shocking but somehow necessary. You know what I think, Nyla said finally. I'm certain you're going to tell me. I think you came here because you wanted to be somewhere nobody knows you. Somewhere you could just be a guy having a bad day instead of whoever you are out there. She gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the city, toward Victor's entire existence. How's that working out? Poorly. You recognized me. I work in a club owned by people who know you. Your face is basically currency around here. Nyla finished her drink and signaled for another. But recognition and understanding are different things. I know your name. I don't know you. Victor considered this. And if you did know me, I'd probably be disappointed. Most people are disappointing when you get close enough. She smiled, but there was something sharp in it, something that spoke of experience. But hey, prove me wrong. Tell me something real. Something that's not in whatever Wikipedia entry the streets have written about you. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound ridiculous or pathetic? That his empire was built on insecurity? That he'd conquered the city, but couldn't conquer his own shame? That women left him with the regularity of seasons changing, and each departure carved another piece out of whatever soul he had left? I'm afraid, he said instead, the words escaping before he could stop them. Nyla raised an eyebrow. Of everything. She laughed again, but this time it was softer, almost kind. Now that's honest. Terrifying, but honest. She raised her fresh drink in a mock toast.
To fear, then.
The one thing even money can't fix. Victor clinked his glass against hers, and for the first time since Gabriella had fled his penthouse, since Carlo's confession had exploded his world, since the latest rejection had confirmed what he'd always suspected about himself, Victor felt something other than empty. He felt seen. Nyla downed half her drink in one smooth motion and stood. "My decompression time is over. Try not to have any more existential crises in my booth, Moretti. It's bad for the ambience." She walked away before Victor could respond, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. He sat alone with his whiskey and the bass and the strange, unfamiliar feeling that something had just shifted in a way he couldn't quite name. His phone buzzed. A message from Tommy. "Boss, Detective Harris called again. Says it's urgent." Victor ignored it. For once, the Empire could wait. He ordered another drink and settled deeper into Nyla's booth, watching the stage where another dancer had taken her place but somehow couldn't command the same gravity. He'd come here to escape. Instead, he'd found something far more dangerous than any detective or betrayal. He'd found curiosity. The woman sitting across from Victor radiated the kind of confidence that couldn't be bought, inherited, or stolen. It simply was, like oxygen or gravity, and Victor found himself leaning forward despite every instinct telling him to maintain distance. "I'm Victor," he started, reaching for the power move of a formal introduction. "I know who you are," she interrupted, waving away his words like cigarette smoke. "Your reputation walked in 5 minutes before you did. Also, your cologne is announcing itself from across the room."
Subtle.
Victor should have been offended. Men had lost teeth for less disrespect. Instead, he felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward in something dangerously close to a smile. "And you are? Tired of men who think money makes them interesting." She flagged down a server with 2 fingers, the gesture economical and commanding. "But since you're taking up my decompression space after a 3-hour shift, I'm Nyla. And you're buying my drink." The server appeared instantly, and Nyla ordered something complicated involving tequila and lime. Victor ordered another whiskey, mostly because his brain was still catching up to the conversation. "Decompression space?" he asked. "This booth. I sit here every night after work, drink exactly 1.5 drinks, and remind myself why I do this job." Nyla stretched, her shoulders rolling back with the satisfaction of someone who'd earned her exhaustion. "Usually, men smart enough to leave me alone during this ritual are smart enough to not need lessons in reading social cues. I wasn't aware there were assigned seats. Now you are." Their drinks arrived. Nyla took a sip of hers and made a face that suggested the bartender had gotten creative with the ratios. Victor found himself watching her with the kind of attention he usually reserved for business negotiations and people he planned to destroy. "So," Nyla said, setting down her glass, "what brings a man who probably owns 3 cars worth more than this building to a place where the bathroom requires a tetanus shot?" "Escaping. From everything." Nyla laughed, the sound cutting through the club's bass like a knife through butter. "Oh, you're one of those. The tortured rich guy having an existential crisis. Let me guess, your assistant bought you the wrong yacht color?" "My oldest friend betrayed me, stole from me, and then killed himself," Victor said flatly. "Or was killed. I'm not sure which is worse." The laughter died in Nyla's throat. She studied him with new intensity, her eyes narrowing as if trying to determine whether he was lying or simply unhinged. "That's either the truth or you're the world's most committed sad boy." "It's the truth." "Well, damn." Nyla took another sip of her drink. "That's significantly less funny than yacht colors. My condolences." They sat in silence for a moment, the club's chaos swirling around them like they were in the eye of a particularly loud storm. Victor couldn't remember the last time someone had responded to his problems with anything other than fear or calculation. Nyla's bluntness felt like cold water on a burn, shocking but somehow necessary. "You know what I think," Nyla said finally. "I'm certain you're going to tell me. I think you came here because you wanted to be somewhere nobody knows you. Somewhere you could just be a guy having a bad day instead of whoever you are out there." She gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the city, toward Victor's entire existence. "How's that working out?" "Poorly. You recognized me. I work in a club owned by people who know you. Your face is basically currency around here. Nyla finished her drink and signaled for another. But recognition and understanding are different things. I know your name. I don't know you. Victor considered this. And if you did know me, I'd probably be disappointed. Most people are disappointing when you get close enough. She smiled, but there was something sharp in it, something that spoke of experience. But hey, prove me wrong. Tell me something real. Something that's not in whatever Wikipedia entry the streets have written about you. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound ridiculous or pathetic? That his empire was built on insecurity? That he'd conquered the city, but couldn't conquer his own shame? That women left him with the regularity of seasons changing, and each departure carved another piece out of whatever soul he had left? I'm afraid, he said instead, the words escaping before he could stop them. Nyla raised an eyebrow. Of everything. She laughed again, but this time it was softer, almost kind. Now that's honest. Terrifying, but honest. She raised her fresh drink in a mock toast.
To fear, then.
The one thing even money can't fix. Victor clinked his glass against hers, and for the first time since Gabriella had fled his penthouse, since Carlo's confession had exploded his world, since the latest rejection had confirmed what he'd always suspected about himself, Victor felt something other than empty. He felt seen. Nyla downed half her drink in one smooth motion and stood. My decompression time is over. Try not to have any more existential crises in my booth, Moretti. It's bad for the ambience. She walked away before Victor could respond, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. He sat alone with his whiskey and the bass and the strange, unfamiliar feeling that something had just shifted in a way he couldn't quite name. His phone buzzed. A message from Tommy. Boss, Detective Harris called again. Says it's urgent. Victor ignored it. For once, the Empire could wait. He ordered another drink and settled deeper into Nyla's booth, watching the stage where another dancer had taken her place, but somehow couldn't command the same gravity. He'd come here to escape. Instead, he'd found something far more dangerous than any detective or betrayal. He'd found curiosity. Victor returned to the club 3 nights later, telling himself it was because he needed neutral ground to think, not because he wanted to see whether Nyla's sharp tongue was a fluke or a permanent feature. He was lying to himself, naturally, but lies were comfortable at this point in his life. The same refrigerator-sized bouncer nodded him through. The same bass rattled his ribs. The same red lights painted everything in shades of danger and possibility. Victor made his way to the corner booth, like a homing pigeon returning to a roost it barely remembered leaving. Nyla was already there. You're in my seat, she said without looking up from her phone. You said it was your decompression booth. You're not working yet. Bold of you to assume I haven't already had a day that requires decompression. She finally glanced at him, her expression somewhere between amused and annoyed. Also bold of you to come back. Most men with egos the size of continents don't return after I've thoroughly bruised said ego. Victor slid into the opposite seat. I don't have an ego. Everyone has an ego. Yours is just wearing an expensive suit and pretending to be humility. Nyla pocketed her phone. So, what brings you back to the land of tetanus-inducing bathrooms? More existential dread? Another dead friend? Or are you just slumming it for fun now? I'm trying to figure you out. Good luck with that. I've been trying for 28 years, and I'm still confused. She flagged down the same server, who seemed to materialize from thin air. The usual Marcus. And whatever brooding wealth over here is drinking. Marcus, the server grinned. Whiskey neat. I remember. Of course you do, Nyla said. He tips like he's apologizing for being rich. Victor had tipped $50 on a $12 drink. He wasn't about to apologize for it now. Is everything a performance with you? Is everything a transaction with you? Nyla countered. You came back because you wanted something. Information, entertainment, absolution. People like you don't do anything without calculating the return on investment. People like me.
Rich.
Powerful. Probably dangerous in ways I don't want to know about. She leaned back as Marcus delivered their drinks with impressive speed. You're here because something about this place, or me, or this booth makes you feel something other than whatever emotional wasteland you live in normally. Victor took a drink, buying time to figure out how someone he'd known for exactly one conversation could read him like a quarterly earnings report. You're direct. Life's too short for subtlety. I dance for dollars and deal with men who think those dollars entitle them to my time, my body, and my fake enthusiasm. When I'm off the clock, I don't have the energy to pretend. Nyla sipped her drink, her eyes never leaving his face. So, here's some more directness. Why are you really here, Victor? The honest answer sat in his throat like broken glass. Because you didn't flinch. Because you didn't calculate my net worth with your eyes. Because when you looked at me, you saw a person instead of a bank account or a reputation or a disappointment. I don't know, he said instead, which was at least partially true. Now that I believe. Nyla smiled, and it transformed her face from sharp to something approaching warm. Most people who end up here don't know why either. They just know they can't be wherever they were before. Where were you before this? Nursing school, if you can believe it. Made it 2 years before I realized I hated blood, couldn't handle death, and was absolutely terrible at comforting people. She traced the rim of her glass with one finger. Turned out I was much better at taking money from men who were already comfortable objectifying women. At least this way, I control the terms. Victor found himself leaning forward. You don't seem like someone who needs to justify her choices. I don't. But men like you always silently judge anyway, so I figured I'd get ahead of it. She drained half her drink in one smooth motion. Besides, nursing pays $40,000 a year after 4 years of school and crippling debt. I make that in 3 good months here, with better hours and significantly less exposure to bodily fluids. Practical. Practical is my middle name. Well, it's actually Marie, but practical should have been. Nyla set down her glass with a decisive click. Your turn. Give me something real again. You did it once, you can do it twice. Victor hesitated. The club pulsed around them, music and bodies and transactions happening in real time, but their booth felt oddly insulated, like a confessional with better lighting and worse acoustics. I built an empire because I was told I couldn't, he said slowly. I became feared because I couldn't be loved. And now I'm sitting in a strip club across from a woman who sees right through me because everywhere else, people only see what I've built, not what I am. Nyla was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she raised her glass.
To being seen, then.
Even when it's uncomfortable. Victor clinked his glass against hers for the second time in 3 days. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Now you're getting it. Nyla finished her drink and stood. Same time next week, Moretti? I'll be here. We'll see if you mean that. She walked away, her movements fluid and purposeful, leaving Victor alone with his thoughts and the growing suspicion that he'd just agreed to something far more complicated than weekly drinks. His phone buzzed. Another message from Detective Harris. Another problem requiring his attention. Another piece of his empire demanding he return to being Victor Moretti, feared and untouchable. He silenced the phone and ordered another drink. The empire could wait. Victor kept his word. The following week found him back in the booth, and the week after that, and the week after that. What started as curiosity became routine, and routine became something dangerously close to necessity. Nyla never asked why he kept coming back, and Victor never offered an explanation. Some things existed better, without definition. On their 5th meeting, she brought him coffee instead of ordering drinks. You look like Death's neglected cousin, she said, sliding a paper cup across the table. Black, 2 sugars. Don't ask how I knew. Victor accepted it gratefully. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, too busy untangling the web of theft Carlo had left behind. 3 properties mortgaged without authorization. 2 offshore accounts bleeding money to untraceable recipients. A dozen smaller betrayals that added up to something catastrophic. Rough week. Nyla asked. Rough month. Rough year. Rough life, if we're being honest. Victor drank the coffee like it was medicine. How do you do it? Do what? Stay so unbothered. Nothing seems to touch you. Nyla laughed, but it came out bitter. Oh, Things touch me. I'm just really good at compartmentalizing. Dancer Nyla smiles and performs and takes money. Real Nyla goes home, eats ice cream straight from the container, and wonders if this is really what her guidance counselor meant by reaching my full potential. I'm not sure I believe you have doubts about anything. Everyone has doubts, Victor. Some of us are just better actors. She leaned back, studying him with that unsettling intensity she'd perfected. You want to know my secret? I decided a long time ago that other people's opinions of me were their problem, not mine. Freed up a lot of mental space. I wish I could do that. You can't buy confidence, unfortunately. Trust me, enough rich men have tried. Nyla pulled out her phone, scrolled briefly, then turned the screen toward him. See this? It's a message from a regular. Wants to know if I'll meet him outside the club for triple my usual rate. Victor felt something dark coil in his chest. And I'm showing you, because this happens daily. Sometimes hourly. Men think everything has a price, including dignity. She pocketed the phone. The difference between me and most people is I've made peace with being underestimated. They see a stripper, I see a woman funding her exit strategy. Exit strategy? I'm not doing this forever. Another 2 years, maybe 3, and I'll have enough saved to open my own business. Something legitimate, something mine. Her eyes gleamed with an ambition Victor recognized because he'd once had it himself, before ambition curdled into compensation. A wine bar, maybe, or a bookstore. Haven't decided yet. Victor found himself smiling despite the exhaustion. A stripper who wants to sell books. A dancer who wants to sell experiences. There's a difference. Nyla finished her coffee. Everyone has layers, Moretti. The problem is most people never bother looking past the surface. Is that what we're doing? Looking past surfaces? I don't know. Are we? She tilted her head, the question hanging between them like smoke. Because from where I'm sitting, you keep showing up, but you're still holding back. You give me pieces, but never the whole picture. Victor's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it. Detective Harris again, now threatening subpoenas. His lawyer warning about federal investigations. His accountant discovering another missing property, this one a warehouse that had apparently been sold 6 months ago without Victor's knowledge or signature. Talk to me, Nyla said quietly. Whatever's eating you alive, it's getting worse. I can see it. My life is falling apart. The words came out flat, factual. My oldest friend betrayed me. My organization is hemorrhaging money and credibility, and I'm realizing that everything I built might have been built on foundations made of lies. So burn it down and start over. Victor laughed, the sound hollow. You say that like it's simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. Nyla leaned forward, her voice dropping. You know what I think your real problem is? You've spent so long being Victor Moretti, the terrifying Mafia boss, that you've forgotten how to just be Victor. The person. The human being underneath all that fear and money and reputation. And what if there's nothing underneath? What if the reputation is all there is? Then you're even more pathetic than I thought, and I've significantly overestimated how interesting you are. She stood abruptly. I need to work. Stay, go, have another existential crisis. Whatever you need. Victor watched her walk toward the back rooms where dancers prepared for their sets. She moved through the club like she owned it, unbowed and unbroken by a world that constantly tried to diminish her. His phone buzzed again. His empire demanding attention, his problems multiplying like rabbits, his carefully constructed life requiring immediate intervention. He silenced it and ordered another coffee. The booth had become his therapy, and Nyla had become something he couldn't quite name. Not a friend, because friends implied equal footing. Not a confidant, because he still held back the worst parts. Something else entirely, something that existed in the space between confession and connection. Marcus appeared with the coffee. She likes you, you know. She has a strange way of showing it. That's how you know it's real. Marcus grinned. The fake ones are always nice. The real ones call you on your garbage. Victor drank his coffee and watched the stage, waiting for Nyla's set to begin. He told himself he was staying because he had nowhere else to be. He was lying again, but lies were comfortable. 2 months into their strange arrangement, Nyla showed up to the booth wearing a black eye hidden poorly under makeup that was 3 shades too light. Victor saw it immediately. Years of violence had taught him to recognize its aftermath in all its forms. The slight puffiness around her orbital bone, the way she held her head at an angle to keep the light from hitting it directly, the tightness around her mouth that spoke of pain being actively managed. "Don't," she said before he could speak. "Don't ask, don't offer to kill anyone, and definitely don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm broken. Like I need saving." Nyla ordered her usual drink with more force than necessary. It was a customer who got handsy. Security handled it. "I'm fine." "You're not fine." "I'm functional. There's a difference." The drink arrived and she took a long sip. "Besides, you should see the other guy. Tommy Three Fingers lost 2 more fingers tonight, courtesy of Bruno the bouncer." Victor's hands clenched involuntarily. The urge to find this Tommy person and finish what Bruno started was overwhelming, primal, and completely inappropriate given that Nyla had explicitly told him not to. "Tell me his last name." "Absolutely not. I know that tone. That's your murder tone." Nyla pointed at him with her glass. "I don't need you catching a charge because some drunk idiot forgot that touching requires consent. It's handled." "It's not handled until I say it's handled." "Oh, now you're big and scary?" She laughed, then winced as the movement jarred her injury. "Victor, I've been dealing with entitled men since I was 16 and working retail. This isn't my first black eye, and it probably won't be my last. Welcome to being a woman in a world designed by men." Something in Victor's chest cracked. Not broke, because breaking implied it was whole to begin with, but cracked in the way ice cracks under pressure, splintering in directions you can't predict or control. That's not acceptable. And yet it's reality. Nyla's voice softened slightly. "Look, I appreciate the protective instinct or whatever this is, but I'm not your responsibility. I'm not your anything. We drink coffee, we have weird philosophical conversations, and sometimes you look at me like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve. That doesn't make you my knight in expensive armor. What if I want to be?" The question hung between them like a grenade with a pin halfway out. Nyla stared at him, her good eye wide with something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Don't do that," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Catch feelings. Get invested. Start thinking that what we have here is more than 2 lonely people killing time in a strip club." She set down her drink carefully. "I've seen this movie, Victor. Rich guy meets dancer, decides she needs rescuing. Everything ends badly. Usually for the dancer. I'm not trying to rescue you. Then what are you trying to do?" Victor didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers and none of them made sense. He wanted to destroy the man who'd hurt her. He wanted to know everything about her exit strategy and fund it immediately. He wanted to understand how someone with a black eye could sit across from him and still radiate more strength than most of his armed lieutenants. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever this is, it's not nothing." Nyla was quiet for a long time, her finger tracing patterns in the condensation on her glass. Around them, the club pulsed with its usual chaos, but their booth felt separate, insulated, like they existed in a bubble where normal rules didn't apply. "You want to know something funny?" she finally said. "When you first walked in here, I thought you were just another rich asshole looking to feel dangerous by visiting the poor side of town. I had you completely figured out. And now I think you might actually be human under all that tailored menace." She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "Which is terrifying, by the way. It's easier when people are exactly what they appear to be. Tell me about it." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their respective poisons and pretending the conversation hadn't just shifted into territory neither of them was prepared for. Victor's phone buzzed repeatedly, his lawyer now sending increasingly frantic messages about federal investigators requesting meetings. His empire was imploding in slow motion, and for once, he couldn't bring himself to care. "I should go," Nyla said, but she didn't move. "You should. My set starts in 20 minutes. "I know. You're going to watch, aren't you?" "Probably." She smiled, Small and complicated. You know what the worst part about you is, Moretti? You're making me believe that maybe not all men are trash. And that's really inconvenient for my worldview. I'll try to be more consistently terrible. Too late. She stood, wincing again at the movement. The damage is done. Victor watched her walk toward the dressing rooms, his chest still cracked and his mind spinning with possibilities he had no business entertaining. Somewhere in the background, his phone buzzed with another crisis, another problem, another piece of his carefully constructed life demanding attention. He silenced it completely this time. Some things were more important than empires, even if he didn't fully understand what those things were yet. The night everything changed started with Victor making a decision that would have horrified his younger, more cautious self. He invited Nyla to dinner. Real dinner, not club drinks and philosophical sparring, but an actual restaurant with tablecloths and a wine list longer than most legal documents. She said yes, which surprised them both. They met at a place downtown, expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of restaurant where mob bosses and CEOs ate side by side and pretended not to recognize each other. Nyla arrived wearing a dress that probably cost less than Victor's tie, but somehow made every other woman in the room look overdressed. "This feels weird," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Weird how? Like we've left our natural habitat. You're not brooding in a strip club. I'm not serving existential wisdom between drink orders. We're just two people having dinner like normal humans." She picked up the menu, her eyes widening at the prices. Very expensive normal humans. Is this entree actually $60 or is that a typo? It's not a typo. Then I'm ordering 3 of them. She grinned, but there was nervousness underneath it, a vulnerability Victor hadn't seen before. "I'm kidding. Mostly." The waiter appeared, took their orders with the practiced discretion of someone paid to forget faces, and disappeared. Victor poured wine that cost more than some people's car payments, and they sat in the strange intimacy of a first date that came months too late. "So," Nyla said, swirling her wine, "is this where you tell me your tragic backstory? Because I should warn you, I've heard a lot of tragic backstories. The bar is pretty high." "I don't have a tragic backstory. Everyone has a tragic backstory. Some of us just hide it better." She took a sip, made an impressed face at the wine quality. "Come on, Moretti. We've been doing this dance for months. Give me something real. Something that explains why a man who could have anyone spends his nights in a strip club talking to a dancer who gives him grief." Victor set down his glass carefully. The restaurant hummed around them with muted conversations and the soft clink of silverware. Normal people having normal dinners, completely unaware that their quiet corner booth contained a mafia boss confessing to the first person who'd ever really listened. "I can't keep women," he said finally. "They all leave. Every single one." Nyla raised an eyebrow. "That's it? That's your big revelation? You have bad luck with relationships?" "Victor, welcome to being human. We all have terrible relationship histories." "It's not bad luck. It's a pattern." He drank more wine than was probably advisable. "They leave for the same reason, every time. Because when it comes down to it, when clothes come off and expectations meet reality, I'm not what they were hoping for." "You're going to need to be more specific." Victor felt heat crawl up his neck. This was the moment. The confession he'd never made sober, never made to someone who mattered, never made to someone who might actually stay long enough to hear the answer. "I'm small," he said quietly. "Down there." Smaller than expectations, smaller than ego, smaller than every joke that's been made about compensation and sports cars and building empires, because I'm trying to make up for genetic disappointment. The words hung in the air like smoke. Nyla stared at him, her expression unreadable. Victor waited for the inevitable, the laugh or the pity or the polite excuse about early mornings and sudden emergencies. Instead, she said, "Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay." Nyla shrugged. "Is that supposed to change something? Am I supposed to run screaming now? Should I clutch my pearls and call for smelling salts?" Victor blinked. "Most women do. Run, I mean. Not the smelling salts part. Most women are idiots, then." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. Victor, you want to know what's actually unattractive? Men who think their dick is their entire personality. Men who base their whole identity on something they had zero control over. Men who can't be bothered to learn what actually makes women happy because they're convinced that one body part solves everything. That's a very enlightened perspective. It's a realistic perspective. I've been with men who were well-equipped and absolutely useless. I've been with men who made up for any perceived shortcoming with creativity and actual effort. She picked up her wine. Intimacy isn't a measurement, Victor. It's about showing up, paying attention, and actually giving a damn about your partner's experience. Their food arrived, saving Victor from having to respond immediately. He stared at his $60 steak like it held answers to questions he hadn't known how to ask. You're not running, he said finally. I'm eating a very expensive dinner. Running would be wasteful. Nyla cut into her own meal. But seriously, if that's your big dark secret, you've wasted months of dramatic buildup. I thought you were going to tell me you were secretly bankrupt or married or a serial killer. Just inadequate. Only if you decide to be. She pointed her fork at him. Here's the thing about insecurity, Victor. It's a choice. You can let it define you, or you can decide it's just one part of a much bigger picture. Your call. Victor had built an empire on making calls. Life or death, profit or loss, loyalty or betrayal. But this decision, this choice to believe that maybe, possibly, he was more than his worst fear, felt infinitely harder than any he'd made before. What if I choose wrong, he asked. Then you try again. Nyla smiled. That's how being human works. We mess up, we learn, we try again. Welcome to the club, Moretti. Membership fees are emotional vulnerability and occasional humiliation. Victor laughed, surprising himself. That's a terrible sales pitch. And yet here you are, buying in. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that comes when two people have said everything that needs saying and are comfortable letting the moment breathe. Victor found himself watching Nyla, studying the way she attacked her food with the same confidence she brought to everything else, no hesitation or pretense. Can I ask you something? He said eventually. You're going to anyway. Why did you say yes to this dinner? Nyla set down her fork, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Honestly, because you're the first man in years who's looked at me and seen an actual person instead of a fantasy or a transaction. You show up, you listen, you don't make assumptions.
She paused.
Also, you're damaged in interesting ways, and I've always had terrible taste in men. I'm damaged. Victor, you spent 2 months having existential conversations in a strip club before working up the courage to ask me to dinner. You're absolutely damaged.
She grinned.
But so am I, so we match. What's your damage? Trust issues, abandonment problems, and a pathological need to prove I don't need anyone. Nyla ticked them off on her fingers. Also, I attract emotionally unavailable men like a magnet attracts metal, then get angry when they turn out to be exactly what they advertised. It's a whole thing. That does sound like a thing. Welcome to humanity. Population, everyone. She finished her wine. The question is, what are we going to do about all this damage? Ignore it and hope it goes away? Address it like adults? Pretend we're both perfectly functional people who definitely don't have issues. Victor considered this. His phone had been buzzing in his pocket all evening, his empire slowly collapsing while he sat in an expensive restaurant confessing his deepest insecurities to a woman who should have run screaming months ago. The old Victor would have left immediately, would have prioritized business over feelings, would have protected himself from vulnerability at all costs. The new Victor, the one currently emerging from years of armor and isolation, had different priorities. I vote for addressing it, he said. Like adults. Whatever that means. It means we're probably going to mess this up spectacularly. Nyla signaled for the check. But at least we'll mess it up together, which is better than messing it up alone. The waiter brought the bill and Victor paid it without looking at the total. They walked out into the cool night air, the city sprawling around them with its usual chaos and possibility. Victor's car was parked nearby, Tommy waiting patiently behind the wheel, but neither of them moved toward it. So, Nyla said. What happens now? I don't know. Good. I hate plans, anyway. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them until Victor could smell her perfume, something floral and unexpected. But for the record, if you're going to kiss me, now would be an excellent time. Victor had orchestrated hits, negotiated million-dollar deals, and stared down men twice his size without flinching. But leaning down to kiss Nyla felt like the bravest thing he'd ever done. Her lips were soft, her hand warm against his chest, and for the first time in his entire life, Victor felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly enough. 3 weeks after their first kiss, Victor found himself in Nyla's apartment above the laundromat, surrounded by mismatched furniture and the persistent smell of fabric softener. It was the furthest thing from his penthouse, from his world of marble and imported leather, and somehow it felt more like home than anywhere he'd lived in 20 years. They were sitting on her couch, a second-hand monstrosity that sagged in the middle, watching some cooking show neither of them cared about. Nyla had her feet tucked under her, wearing sweatpants and a tank top, looking nothing like the confident dancer who commanded stages and nothing like the sharp-tongued woman who'd first called him out for looking guilty. She looked real. She looked happy. And Victor was terrified. You're doing it again, Nyla said without looking away from the television. Doing what? Retreating into your head. I can physically see you building walls. She turned to face him. Talk to me. Victor wanted to deflect, to make a joke, to do anything other than admit the truth currently eating him alive from the inside out. But they'd made a deal that night at the restaurant. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more letting fear make decisions. I'm waiting for you to leave, he said quietly. I'm literally sitting on my own couch in my own apartment. Where would I go? Not physically leave. Just leave. The way they all did. Victor ran a hand through his hair. We've been doing this for 3 weeks and we haven't actually done anything, and I keep thinking that when we do, when you see what they all saw, you're going to realize you made a mistake. Nyla was quiet for a long moment. Then she grabbed the remote and turned off the television, plunging the apartment into silence broken only by the distant rumble of washing machines below. Victor, look at me.
He did.
Her eyes were fierce, the way they'd been that first night when she'd called him out for looking like he'd killed someone, the way they always were when she was about to say something that would either destroy him or save him. I'm not them, she said firmly. I'm not Isabella or Sophia or any of the other women who were too shallow or too stupid to see past one body part. I'm here because I want to be here, because you make me laugh, because you actually listen when I talk, because you're kind in ways you don't even realize. But what if it's not enough? What if I'm not enough? Then we figured out together. Nyla moved closer, her hand finding his. Do you know what scared me most about you when we first met? Not your reputation, not the fact that you could probably have me disappeared with a phone call. It was how much you reminded me of myself. Both of us hiding behind armor, both of us convinced we weren't worthy of real connection, both of us so scared of being hurt that we'd rather be alone. I don't want to be alone anymore. Then stop trying to be.
She squeezed his hand.
Victor, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it. Not just listen, but hear. You ready? He nodded, his throat tight. You are enough. Exactly as you are. Not because of your money or your power or despite your insecurity. Just you. The person sitting on my terrible couch, worried about disappointing me. That person is enough. Victor felt something crack in his chest, the same way it had cracked when he'd seen her black eye, except this time it wasn't anger or protectiveness. It was hope, fragile and terrifying and entirely new. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Neither do I. But we can figure out together. Nyla stood, pulling him up with her. Come on. Where are we going? My bedroom. Because I'm tired of waiting for you to get out of your own way, and frankly, this conversation has gone on long enough. Victor's heart hammered against his ribs. Nyla, I don't think that's a good idea right now. Of course you don't. You're terrified. She led him down the short hallway to a bedroom that was small and cluttered and entirely hers. But here's the thing about fear, Victor. You can let it control you, or you can walk through it and see what's on the other side. They stood at the foot of her bed, close enough that Victor could feel the heat radiating from her body, could see the slight nervousness in her eyes that told him she wasn't nearly as confident as she was pretending to be. "What if I disappoint you?" he whispered. "What if you don't?" She cupped his face in both hands. "What if all that fear and shame and self-doubt has been for nothing? What if the only thing standing between you and happiness is your own assumption that you don't deserve it?" Victor kissed her then, not gentle or tentative but desperate, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for years. Nyla kissed him back with equal intensity, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his with an urgency that left no room for doubt. What happened next wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and awkward in places, punctuated by nervous laughter and whispered reassurances. Victor discovered that hands were indeed useful, that mouths could accomplish miracles, that paying attention to another person's reactions was infinitely more important than any measurement society obsessed over. And Nyla discovered that vulnerability looked good on Victor, that his careful attention to her pleasure was more attractive than any physical attribute, that sometimes the most broken people fit together in ways that make them whole. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like laundry detergent and new beginnings. Victor stared at the ceiling, waiting for regret or disappointment or the inevitable moment when Nyla would make polite excuses and show him the door.
Instead, she laughed.
"What's funny?" he asked, genuinely confused.
"You. Me."
This whole situation. She propped herself up on one elbow, grinning. "You spent months convinced you were inadequate, and honestly, that was some of the best sex I've had in years. Turns out enthusiasm and actual effort beat size every single time. Who knew?" "You're mocking me. I'm celebrating you, you idiot." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "You were so worried about disappointing me that you worked twice as hard to make sure I was happy. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Victor felt something unfamiliar spreading through his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it as contentment, as peace, as the quiet certainty that maybe, just maybe, he'd found something real. "I love you," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Nyla didn't flinch, didn't panic, didn't make excuses. She just smiled, the kind of smile that could light up the darkest corners of a man's soul.
"I know," she said.
"I love you too. Even though you're dramatic and overthink everything and probably have at least 3 felonies I don't know about. At least 6, actually.
See?
We're learning new things about each other already." She settled back against his chest. "So, what happens now? Do you go back to your penthouse and pretend this was a momentary lapse in judgment? Do I go back to the club and we pretend we're just friends?" "I was thinking something different." "Yeah. I was thinking I'd like to wake up next to you tomorrow. And maybe the day after that. And possibly every day after that for the foreseeable future." Nyla was quiet for so long that Victor worried he'd overstepped. Then she said, "My apartment is tiny and smells like fabric softener. I don't care. Your enemies will think you've gone soft. Let them. Your empire is still falling apart. It can fall apart without me, for one night." Victor pulled her closer. "I spent 35 years building an empire because I thought power could compensate for everything I lacked. Turns out I was wrong. Turns out the only thing I actually needed was someone who saw me as human instead of a reputation." That's very poetic for a man who kills people for a living. "You bring it out in me." They fell asleep like that, tangled together in a bed too small for 2 people, in an apartment that smelled like laundry detergent, in a neighborhood Victor technically owned but had never really seen. His phone buzzed periodically with crises and emergencies and problems that would still be there in the morning. For the first time in his life, Victor didn't care. He'd found something more valuable than an empire, more powerful than fear, more lasting than reputation. He'd found someone who looked at his worst parts and said, "So what?" Someone who met his vulnerability with her own. Someone who reminded him that being human wasn't a weakness, but a strength. The city's most feared mafia boss and the dancer who refused to be impressed. Against all odds, against all expectations, against everything that should have kept them apart, they'd found each other. And for once, Victor Moretti felt like exactly enough.